Hey folks, this is Anatoly, and you're listening to the Solana podcast. And today I have Dan Gunsberg with me, who is the CEO, co-founder of the Hxro network. Awesome to have you.
Thanks, Tully. It's great to be here. Happy to be here with you today.
Awesome. Would you want to kind of talk about how you got into crypto and what Hxro network is all about?
Yeah, sure. So my background has largely been in derivatives trading. I started my career on the floor of the Chicago Board of Trade during my summers home from school when I was 18. And right out of college, I started trading U.S. Treasury bonds at first. And then a couple years later, I got into kind of like the third or fourth inning of the internet boom when tech stocks were really starting to roll. And so I started trading tech stocks. It actually got me off the trading floor and did that for a number of years, eventually worked my way back to futures. I started actually trading the short end of the yield curve. And then all the way up to like 2011, I joined a proprietary trading firm that two of my friends had co-founded and eventually ended up becoming the chief operating officer there. And while I was there, 2015, Bitcoin had a lot of what seemed to be upside optionality. It kind of had gone, it was coming out the back end of the bear market. I think started in like early 2014, and I thought there was good optionality in it, and so started buying some Bitcoin and kind of sent me down the rabbit hole. And by 2017, I was all in on crypto and ended up parting ways with the firm. And in 2018, my now partner, a guy who he was running an agricultural options market making desk at our firm, he left a few months later and then joined me. We started trading crypto together. And while we were trading, we ended up conceptualizing Hxro. And really the idea was to just find a more simplified, kind of a little bit more fun way of interacting with the market and trading. And a lot of it came from kind of seeing a lot of retail traders make their way, everyone was kind of finding their way to BitMEX and without too much experience, kind of over levering and kind of rinsing the the remaining crypto that they had left. And it was kind of hard to see after a while. And so we said, hey, can we find a way that like we can really kind of balance kind of the emotional or the financial side and the financial reward that comes with trading, kind of, and introduce some of the emotional side of like social and gaming and things like that. And came up with this idea to build this more simplified way of trading the market, which was really a combination of like a cash or nothing digital option with a parimutualized payoff to it. And that ended up becoming what is known on Hxro.io as Moonrect. And we built that in the last half of 2018, launched it in 2019, and had been building the platform ever since. So we now have Hxro.io have three specific products. One is that Moonrect, which is the parimutuel, and then two products that are other light exotic options. One is a one touch, and one is a little bit more analogous to like a vanilla option, but has some different tenets to it. Out of that, we always knew that we kind of wanted to take the steps towards eventually progressively decentralizing the platform. And this past year, it was kind of a combination, I think, of what our kind of view of the universe was, or as a whole, and kind of what was happening socially in the world. And it just seems like the time to make the transition was now. And what we had decided to do is that it kind of came out of that, and it also came out of the fact that we were on a B2B basis. We were starting to get a lot of interest for like white labeling of our existing products, and we knew there was some difficulties with that, potentially around regulation and whatnot. And so it just made sense for us to say, like, well, what if we started to disintermediate this and build a network out of it, and at the center of the network kind of lay the groundwork for and plumbing for what are these various types of derivative protocols that operators can come build on or attach as nodes to. Individual users can come, on a Web3 basis and access it very easily in a non-custody way. And kind of that with what was going on in the world at the time, and also kind of where we think the world is going, which we do think that this whole concept of networks and scaling networks, something like an exchange. I feel like exchanges, they're almost like in the future, and you kind of look out like the world will look like in 10 years or so, let's say, and you really have these networks as like pillars for different purposes. And exchanges, in my mind, almost feel like public utilities in a way, and really building the plumbing and tooling that will allow any operator or any user to come and build on top of it, using these like kind of unique, light, exotic protocols that we're creating, which ideally should give people a more simplistic way to interface with various types of derivatives and give them some level of optionality, no pun intended, to access the market kind of in new and creative ways.
Do you think the tech that we see for exchanges, even centralized ones like Binance, FTX, is it ahead of what you would find at like New York Stock Exchange and NYSE, or I mean like CME, or are we still kind of behind? Like, is this?
I think in the I think from a technology perspective, it's not too much different from what I experienced in legacy markets, other than the fact that maybe at least in crypto, that some of the exchanges aren't quite as advanced on the connectivity side. Like, I think they're obviously doing things in the legacy world in much more higher frequency and connecting via like fixed protocols or things like that you don't really get on a lot of the exchanges that exist in crypto today. But some of the things that I think are that you don't get are really kind of on the financial side. Like in my mind, like being able to go to FTX and actually like lend your assets, to me is pretty amazing. And you kind of have this way of always keeping your capital working and kind of without this concept, without this middleman of like an FCM, which is something that is, that exists like in the derivatives world and legacy world. Without like that middleman is usually the one that's kind of keeping that spread, or they're taking your capital and aggregating it up and then like relending it or earning interest on it while you're utilizing their pipes to trade through an exchange. Like, without that middleman there, that creates a lot more opportunity for market participants. And that's one thing, like with FTX, for example, that I love about it is that a lot of that opportunity is being given back to the end user, which is something that really doesn't exist. Like, you're generally not capturing any float on your capital when you're depositing like cash, for example, to an FCM. And the fact that you can go to FTX and lend your money on an hourly basis at pretty competitive rates is really compelling. So I think that's kind of something that really, in my mind, is pretty awesome.
Is that like lack of competitiveness? Like, why? like
why does it exist?
Why doesn't it exist in like on E-Trade? Like, why can't they lend?
Oh, because that's how E-Trade like makes most of its money. Either, I actually don't have the real answer to that, but what I do know is that like with, at least when interest rates are above zero, that one of the ways like a futures clearing merchant, for example, makes most of their money is by taking your money and then reinvesting it, much like a bank would.
Yeah.
And so they're capturing that float. And you have to think, like, let's say you have $20 billion sitting on your books at an FCM. And then like, if, government paper is paying 3%, and you can take the majority of that, like all the unencumbered cash that's sitting on your books, and earn 3% on, say, even if it's on 10 billion, it's quite a bit of free cash that's coming back to you as a company. And I think, you're going to have to chop some hands off to, get them to let that go. So I think that's why you don't get it on those markets. And if you do, it's always like, hey, we'll pay you a 0.3% annualized percentage rate on your money, but they're obviously making a much wider spread of that. And I'm not saying that they're not doing that in legacy exchange markets in crypto, or they're not going to be doing that in DeFi now. Like, obviously that is, one of the drivers of what's going on in the whole DeFi space. But at least here, the yields are much more competitive now, or, much more lucrative for the end users. So.
Yeah, it's rent seekers, man. It's like
yeah, totally.
I love the calling it chopping hands instead of disintermediation.
Right. Well, I think disintermediation is our way of approaching it, which is the smart way, as opposed to the old Chicago way of your signature or your head or your blood. Yeah.
That's crazy. Like, in my mind, I think those entities that have so much to lose from adoption of crypto effectively have lost already.
Yeah.
Because like, this is just software, right? Like, there's like it's unstoppable because it is just code.
It's the coolest part about it, and one of many reasons. But once it starts to really capture kind of the feel like we're on the right side of the hockey stick at this point. And so, as things scale, it just gets harder and harder. And look, you're seeing it every day. You're seeing more and more of this crossover from legacy markets. And, I get on the phone with a lot of like, whether they're like CEOs of prop firms or, some of the executives from the FCMs, and some of them got on it pretty early. And, fortunately, like when I was at DV Trading, like we captured, there was a guy there that had gotten into it pretty early, and fortunately for all of us had, brought it to everybody's attention. And, I've always been super grateful for that, because I probably would not have really gotten into crypto probably until 2017 at the time, but it got me in early, and it just got turned off by so many for so long. And I just feel like there's going to be so many people that are going to be rushing in to try to come in late. And a lot of those like legacy games that kind of strong-armed, kind of the smaller or the up and comer or the disruptor out of markets. Like I feel like just cryptos as a whole, like regardless of the ecosystem that you're part of, is just like collectively grown much larger and kind of capture resistant at this point, that it's going to be very difficult for these guys to do anything but kind of fall into line.
Yep. Which is, I think, exciting for all the disruptors. Like us,
yes,
right?
Like, exactly. Exactly. It's, and it's one of the things that, from our, like, we started very centralized, and we kind of are like in this thing where we're working backwards and, and progressively decentralizing Hxro. And that's definitely been tricky, as there's not too much by way of like playbook on how to do it correctly, and definitely have surrounded ourselves with good counsel and accounting firms and whatnot to make sure that, that we're doing this in a sequenced way that allows the network and allows Hxro and the participants in the network to ideally, eventually take this on. And, we want this network to, and I say it to, our team, is like, look, we're just laying the groundwork here. And, we've already started to bring in a couple of groups that have experience, whether it's engineering teams, guys that, have worked on Solana core, which has been, which is really exciting to be working with those guys and bringing these guys in. And so I say to my team all the time, like, we want this to outgrow us as fast as possible. And like one of our measures of success is us becoming somewhat irrelevant to the network. And we're really kind of committed to that path at this point. And I do think it's the future kind of how things are going to operate in the world going forward. So,
yeah, like building networks, I think it's like, I think that one of the coolest parts of this is that's so different from traditional finance. I think in my mind, or even like traditional startups, like we're not building a SaaS. There isn't like, we're not trying to twist somebody's arm into a subscription, right? You're actually trying to get them into the ecosystem and like give them stuff away for free as much as we can.
Totally. I mean, I'm sure you've experienced this as much as anybody. When you talk to people that are just kind of getting their head around it, especially if they come from like a deep finance background, and like over the last 20 years, like they will look at you like you are absolutely crazy. And you're like, wait, what? You're driving all the value of your network back to your community and your token. You're not keeping it as revenue to your company. And I was like, well, no, that's not how this works. But ultimately, when you step back and think about it, like it puts you in a position to grow so much larger and so much more, in such a different way that truly does capture the effects of like kind of partially of what all this was set out to be in the first place. And like really capturing those network effects and scaling. It's really exciting to see like our community, has been so supportive of it. And we're just really excited to be going down this path now. So,
I think that like 90s tech firms actually get this.
Sure.
They gave everything out for free to grow as fast as they could. And there was like the shift where like those business models, like the ad-based ones, were basically dried up, and like everything went back to subscription. You got to pay for it every month or something like that. You're trying to like we went from a world where everything on the internet was free to where everybody's trying to kind of like extract their rent from you on the internet.
Totally. It kind of went from like I was reading something, I forget who wrote it. It was a book around the community capitalism. Somebody was making a comment on it, and it was really simple. They just like, what do they say? They said from like 2000 to 2010 was like shareholder capitalism.
Yep.
And then 2010 to 2020 was consumers. And then 2020 forward is really community capitalism, which like community capitalism in like a geographic sense is somewhat analogous, but like just in a network sense, I think it's kind of what's going to be happening here.
Yeah, that's a really good way to put it. I've never heard that term before, but that's kind of interesting. I thought that like the coolest thing at a DeFi summer was this like rapid formation of communities, around capital, right? Like capital is a part of it, but also the only thing that really identified them was this token, right? Didn't like as silly as like Yams was. There were 10,000 people that all came together around one thing.
It's so cool, and it had those effects of like being a part of community and something larger than you, which is like it's almost these like Maslowian things, like religion in a way. And I want to be careful saying that because I think when the wrong people hear that, they go, "Oh, of course, crypto's a cult," right? But we know that's not the case. Like we're all putting effort into a community, and I would like related it just like like I'm Jewish and like obviously have ties into Israel, and there's these very like socialist style communities that are called kibbutzim, and like it's effectively like these communities that live off of their land, and it's all self-governed, and it has whole hierarchy systems, and it's like their own cities almost, and and for the most part self-sustaining, right? And like it's so relatable. It's like so much of what we're doing are things. I mean, you always say this everyone says this about finance. This is totally true. Like, we're not necessarily reinventing the wheel on things like yield capture or the different ways to like actually trade, but we're just like kind of reinventing the how and like the infrastructure behind it. But it's kind of, to me, is like the same thing around like community capitalism and this concept of building a network where every network participant is putting forth some type of effort effectively to help the others in some way, shape, or form, and being rewarded for it is like a big kibbutz. So
I love it.
Kind of has those same tenets to it, and so I've really like gone down that wormhole and like done a lot of reading around it, and have had a it's been really fascinating, and especially me coming from like I came from a background and like a lot of people that come from the trading world, and obviously you're close with Sam, who's probably one of the most well-known traders in our space and just an exceptional trader and businessman and everything. But you come from this world, especially like in prop trading, where it is very like the bottom line, what determines your fate is your P&L.
Yep.
And that's really it, and so it's really just about, it sounds horrible, but it's like just about making money and really being able to transfer that in a way that you can set up your ecosystem where so many people can benefit. You don't need to know who these people are for the most part. The fact that, you can totally disintermediate it, and, your effort in the ecosystem, ties directly to your reward, and setting up kind of fair schemes for that. And man, there's just a lot to chew on, and there's a lot for us to be building. So super excited.
Yeah, same. I love like the kibbutz analogy. Like there's like a bunch of them, right? So like switching from the Ethereum kibbutz to the Solana kibbutz is like
totally. They all have their own flavor, right? One lives off of a certain type of potato. The other like bases everything they do in like a green leafy lettuce. Very, very DeFi summerish.
Yeah, totally.
That's funny. I think we're headed into a really exciting direction. And, you also have this thing with everything that's gone on in the last couple of years, even socially, it all just like, as bad as so many things happen, it just was like a signal to the world that things needed to change. And I think, what we're doing at crypto is both socially and financially and just everything we're really just kind of reinventing how things are going to work. And I find it hard to, as you said before, it's kind of past that point of no return. And how it fully integrates and how it plays out, I don't think any of us can, going to be able to predict it 100% right, but I think we're all positioning it fairly well.
Is it like development for these products, like these financial products? Is it harder on for like an open network versus an exchange?
Oh yeah, it's definitely different. I think the first thing you have to remind yourself is that like you can't always just like go back and do a hot fix. Like kind of once you're on chain, and like if things go haywire, that's definitely not good. But really trying to think about it in the context of the tenets of the product and kind of how do you build it in a way that, if you have some limitations, there's some like kind of fence around what you can or can't do with it. It's kind of in this place right now where, I think even like building on Solana, like there's, like almost everything we're doing is around like the token, obviously, and like not the Hxro token, but just like tokenizing different, aspects of the products that we're building. And that to me, is something like, okay, like I have like half the engineers are just like building on it, moving fast, and the other half are like, how can we make this even more efficient? Like, what can we do with this to make it even better? And I think that's kind of pretty cool. And I think one of the things of like building to a network like Solana too is that fact that it is kind of open sourced and, for the most part, and the fact that our team comes up with a certain way to look at things, it maybe changes the course of how new projects come on Solana and build as well. And, I think that's pretty neat. And the, just in terms of building the products, again, yeah, going back to like the building and legacy, I think it's probably easier to build certain aspects of it, but I definitely think some of the, like, it's really when you kind of get down to like the granular items and like, can I create something that is pretty much apples to apples, like to what I would deliver centrally. And, part of that is probably what exists in the ecosystem today. What can we compose with that are tools to help us make, our product more commercially viable, or like the products that are being built on our network more commercially viable. And like, you kind of have some of those elements that, pending on the ecosystem you're in, really work. But yeah, I don't know if I gave a good answer there, but definitely has, upsides and challenges. So
Yeah, the hotfix thing is like a hard problem, and like, we have support where you can actually like at the loader level make the program upgradable and go change the bytecode. But
yeah,
the challenge there is that like, how do you tie that into governance, right? If it's like, and that opens up this whole like caboose building question. Like, what flavor of caboose are you building? Do you want everybody to have like an equal share? Do you want to elect a set of devs that have like the right to hot patch stuff? Like it's these are like fun human problems, which
I think you hit the nail on the head. And like, and we're still relatively new to it. So, and you obviously have been deep in the weeds on it, but I think that idea for me of like stopping for a second and going, wait, I can't just make this decision and do this. Like at some point that has, obviously that has to transition to like, do we need to allocate to a certain set of devs and have that voted on to make this hot patch, or, everything across the entire spectrum of the ecosystem. And just like remembering that is one thing that they definitely take some getting used to, that I would say is arguably probably more simplistic in the centralized world, but ultimately ends up being worth it, I think, because you do want to get to a point of sufficient decentralization. So,
did you closely follow the sushi saga? I thought it was amazing that how quickly that kibbutz formed, that there was this like new token, new meme, a bunch of people loved it.
yeah.
And everything fell apart. Like, it just like blew up, right? Like, but enough people were like within the overall crypto community, right? Like we weren't even part of Ethereum.
Yeah.
But we were like watching it closely because we were like tangentially attached to that.
Sure.
And we're like, nobody wanted it to fail. And there was like enough of a kind of like kibbutzes around it that like,
that rallied together. It was like the clans that said like, hey, we're not going to let this thing go to shit. And so that to me was pretty incredible. And It's funny how like social media plays into it so much also. And it's just kind of like our most common form of communication in crypto, and how that like kind of the virality of that story and kind of just how it spread and then what came out of it and watching it all kind of unfold in real time was pretty amazing. But yeah, that's so funny. You're making the kibbutz reference to Sushi Swap. I like it.
I don't think it would be possible to like the difficulty with building a community, I think intentionally, is that like it's hard to like get that ball rolling. Like with sushi, it like kind of rolled itself.
Yeah.
And that's like a, you know, you can't replicate it, right? Like the real like work is like takes years to like get all the folks together, get them connected, start like figuring out where like this community value like capture happens.
Totally. What would you feel if, like with Solana, like what was kind of the inflection point?
We had a set of validators that just kind of loved the idea that hardware could make the thing go faster.
Yeah.
You know, like there's just like a group of people that are like PC builders that are like nerds about optimizations, about network problems, that have like basically they've done DevOps all their life, right? They've understand hardware and they like work with it. And our idea was that like, hey, we can take the skills that you have, right? Like the thing that you know, and make this like really fast thing that could disrupt all of the world's finance.
Yeah.
And that was enough to bring them together, right? Like we needed them, right? That was like the key part.
Were they guys you knew? Were they teams that you knew, or were they just random that came forward?
Like around that time, Cosmos kind of like they were about a year ahead of us, but they kind of put together this like validator community, and a subset of those folks were like our people. And it's not like they left Cosmos; they're still running Cosmos zones. A bunch of them run, you know, Cosmos and a bunch of other Cosmos networks, but like we like needed them, and they're like, oh, this is cool, like we're needed, right? There's like a huge powerful effect of like if somebody like is trying to build something and they need your help like legitimately, it's like a very it's a thing that brings people together.
I love it. That's so true. Actually, when we first launched Hxro, and we kind of just like stealth launched it and gave out some token, like the token had no value at the time. We just gave out some tokens to people and said, hey, try this out, like to 30, 40 people. And then it took off. And I remember having so many people who had no idea who they were hitting me up saying like, how can I help? How can I help? Like whether it was developers, a lot of people in the community. And it's like, just to see people kind of attach onto it goes back to this like thing to me that there's something so powerful, whether it's being an engineer or being part of a community or whatever, like there's something so powerful in just being a part of something that's larger than you are, that has meaning and has purpose, and really just like committing to it. It's really, I think just from the human element, it's very empowering. And I think it's amazing to see. It's something in crypto that's like, to me, it's like definitely one of the more positive aspects of the industry.
Yeah, I think it's what makes it so sticky is that people are working on it, not like, the money helps, right? The money is what allows you to go full time. But if it like disappeared, you would still kind of do it as a hobby, right? And that gives it like this really like long-term survivability. Like, free BSD, there's still people building.
Yeah.
Like but,
it's funny on the money aspect, and like there's obviously so many people that are here just for the financial incentives that exist, and obviously the trading aspect is there and whatnot. But I always try to think about like, you have to kind of take a step back and realize like how progressive and how early of a world that we operate in. And you're almost like, if you're here as a speculator, you're almost like saying, okay, I'm willing to be the test bunny, and like even more so with my capital. And it's funny to see, like, I think you kind of can see a lot of people that get into the space because they hear about it, and they hear about, Bitcoin going from 3,000 to 60,000 or whatever. And they don't realize that they're actually like a part of a massive experiment that iterates like basically as fast as lightning. And like, there's nothing that it's the most like uninhibited form of like experimentation in finance and just in like engineering and just like everything all at once. And it's funny when you see people like, when they're like, well, I came here with with $10,000 and I made $1 million and then it went to zero, all in 8 weeks. and like the fact that that happens. But I kind of look at that as like the in kind of that Gartner cycle, that hype cycle that exists with projects, is like it's the market's way of just saying like, hey, I'm willing to fund you for the long haul. And like the question is like, does that team like, are they taking that capital from that like kind of initial hype and idea that they're building, and can they take that and then kind of put a plan in place that gives them like, does this ultimately have long-term objectives? Like one thing that I love that Serum did was that 7-year lockup. And it sounds so counterintuitive in crypto with the speed that things move, but that was a signal for me, for example, of like, wait a minute, this, Serum is not here to build something really fast and kind of make it cool and exciting, and then everyone will forget about it 5 minutes later. It's really here to build the plumbing and tooling that will one day, hopefully, the New York Stock Exchange is going to build on top of, or the Chicago Mercantile Exchange, or some form of that becomes as large. And like, it's such a strong signal that like, and I also think it's kind of a testament to where we're at just in the cycle of crypto as a whole, of like starting to see more and more projects. And obviously, like when you're building like, big layer one blockchains like Solana and stuff, you want this to survive generations, obviously. And
yeah, I mean, I think this is going to be like my life's work at this point.
I would guess so at this point. Yeah. If somebody doesn't go on the internet and look your name up and know that like this is your life's work at this point, then yes, probably. But I agree. And Serum was very impactful for me. It got me thinking a lot about Hxro, and just again, like I was talking about when we were beginning of our discussion, of like the timing of things, and just like the time was right to really start moving towards decentralizing this and kind of getting this to a place that far outgrows us or our efforts. And and this has definitely turned into my life's work at this point. So I can totally empathize with that.
I thought this was going to be like a conversation about options and like finance, but it's awesome that it's about like community building and kibbutzes.
Yeah. That's funny. That's funny. Yeah. Look, the option stuff is great. I do have a much larger looking, kind of, maybe it's more philosophical view of kind of where the world will be. And, a lot of that is, like, what is my part in that? Like, what kind of path do I want to set forth for the Hxro community? At least like kind of put the kernels in place and then let the community kind of drive it from there. And that to me really is, kind of that philosophy going with like, okay, my place in this really is, building these, these very simple protocols, and make those raw protocols very easy to build too. So, large operators can then come and easily attach to them. And those large operators already have massive user pools, and presenting, hopefully we're creating that plumbing and tooling for them that, that they can then take those and build the types of products that they want off of those, and then provide it to their user base and create value. So
that's awesome. Like I think that like the space is so early that like building out and like testing all these financial money Legos and building the kibbutzes around them is like those might survive, right? Like there's like a chance that this might be still the same thing happening 100 years from now.
I feel like you're spot on, and like we're building the pipes for the kibbutz to have water, and then the kibbutz will iterate towards complex drip irrigation, which is a feat of it's a miracle that you can grow plants in the middle of the desert now because of it. But when they were figuring out how to get water in, like it was just about figuring out getting water in, and not necessarily the advancements that a bunch of engineers from Technion were going to figure out. So yeah, I feel like that, coupled with the restating of infrastructure and in finance, and with that comes things like trading. And I think there's going to be so much more merging of, which is kind of another one of our early Hxro theses, of the merging of finance with kind of gaming, and what can be traded, what can reasonably be traded, what can be hedged. Like there's all this stuff that's, kind of this big ball of wax that's kind of moving around across these different market segments that I think we were kind of trying to capture a bunch of those, but the reality, and I think for the real value, like what has to be there are those foundational elements first, and really building that plumbing, and that's really what Hxro Network is dedicated to. So
awesome. On that note, like, is there anything that you'd want to like tell our users where to find more about Hxro and like what to look forward to?
Yeah. So, pending on when this podcast goes out, we're going to be rolling out our light paper. We've been keeping things relatively stealth, and there's definitely value in like hyping things, but we kind of think what we have is something pretty special, as I think most founders do. And we're really thinking about this for, to be here for the long term, and just building a lot of hype up front didn't really seem optimal for us. So we just have been, kind of building the initial kernels of, what will end up being the foundations of the Hxro Network. And we're going to start rolling out sometime in the beginning to middle of April. And we'll be sharing our light paper. We're definitely iterating on things like, AMMs and how we look at those, and trying to add some level of sophistication. Like we're creating something called we call SAM as a kind of semi-ode to Sam Fried, but it's a smart automated market maker. And the concepts behind that is really moving past this kind of form of like somewhat naive market making, where ultimately, like, somebody that's putting capital into a liquidity pool, most of them aren't really going to have an idea of how to optimize that. They're just doing it for whatever purposes that, whatever their incentives are. But actually attaching an oracle, which is really like a probability oracle. And we're doing this in our pari-mutuel markets first, because those are, kind of much more simplistic in how choices are made in terms of position, because it's not related to price sensitivity, or you don't have different types of complex orders going in. It literally is like, will this market be higher or lower after, over this time period? And then the payout of each side is pari-mutualized. So it's depending on like what each side's weight is in the total pool will determine how that side is paid out. And the ideas around the underlying option and then the pari-mutuel payout, there are sets of teams that are already actively trading on this product that are committed to being the initial teams behind it. And what they'll do is submit as a contract before a contract goes live, like as it's getting closer to the launch of that contract opening, what is the optimal position for that liquidity pool to take, such that over n number of contracts that it ends up like 0 to slightly positive EV. And then they're incentivized by sharing part of the transaction fee that comes out of it. And so those are the probability nodes, and then they submit those to a probability oracle, and then that oracle is basically interacting with the order management system that is managing the liquidity pool. And then from there, it basically will take its position in the pool and more intelligently provide liquidity.
Is it the same pool as like the Serum spot market, or is this like a different pool?
Different pool. These will be their own liquidity pools initially.
Got it.
And they're going to be specific to the pari-mutuel markets, which is the first protocol that we're launching. And then we're just going to test the effectiveness of all that. And then we've already started kind of iterating towards doing this with the next protocols that are going to be launched, which are variations on like vanilla options and on different light exotics.
That's awesome.
Yeah, we're very excited about it.
Cool. Well, yeah, thank you for being on the show. This was an awesome conversation.
Yeah, totally.
And like you guys are rocking it. Love all the progress.
Thanks, man. I really appreciate it. And yeah, we're obviously super excited to be a part of the Solana community. It's been such a good vibe with the entire community. It's like it's very great support, and excited to really be a part of it and help it grow.
Awesome. Thank you so much.